right, hello again, everybody. It is me, Nick Pennsylvania. I'm here as always with Brendan Bond. And just before we get started, we got an interesting evening today. Reading some emails we received, a few that we received recently over the holidays. Just wanted to give a heads up in the near future, probably not the next time we get together, but in the near future, Mike, who started all of this, is coming together. He's got some big thing in the works. It involves our town, the town that we lived in, which was started by a kind of religious society, and a mirror town halfway across the country, or about a third way across the country if you want to split hairs with me. They founded another town once they left here. It's kind of a mirror of our own town, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But Bond and I are going to be heading out on site to some places such as Spirit Falls and the Black Cross, just some places in our general area. Again, we've been getting some requests. There's some interest for us to go some places. So we are going to try to appease folks, especially since, again, we got quite a number of emails from people, and we really appreciate that. So we're going to get on to that. So let me read one of those. But before I do, Brendan, this actually concerns you. We got an email from a listener, Kenny. He is in southwestern Pennsylvania, and something happened in the Pittsburgh region where we live north of Pittsburgh. It kind of made national news. I don't know if you heard about it.
I'm not sure. This is this sounds new to me, so I'm excited.
Now, it sounds like myself, you were kind of not paying close attention to the news with all the holidays and everything, so I'm excited to share this with you because Kenny listens to us quite a bit, loves the show, he says, and thank you for that. I'm just going to go ahead and read the first email he sent because we did a little bit of back and forth. Hey guys, my name is Kenny, love the podcast. I live between Cranberry and Sealy. Anyway, I was on Twitter and there is a ton of talk about a loud explosion sound that is being reported from Plum to Washington and up to Wexford. Some have reported that they felt it. I believe they are looking into an earthquake, but the sound is interesting. More people are talking about a loud sound rather than a shake. I haven't heard it or anything, but I couldn't help but think of one of your experiences where you heard explosion at times, and there's no explanation for it. Just wanted to make you aware of it because it reminded me of your show.
That's wild. No, I did not hear about this.
Wow.
So from Plum to Wexford up to Zealy, that's a pretty wide area.
Well, we had some additional back and forth, and I have some more information to share with you.
I'm excited. I am very. This is about as excited as I can be right now. Please continue, because if there's more information, I definitely want to hear.
Well, Kenny actually sent that first email to us around just after, like 2:05, 2:06 in the afternoon on January 1st. I want you to kind of highlight that time in your mind really quick because we had some back and forth, and I don't want to say what he does for a living, but suffice to say he has a connection to the airport. And let me go to his later email, which I initially missed because he sent a couple at once. But basically, he said that he was not at work today, but he reached out to an operator to see if the 911 unit was running drills or anything today. He did not receive any notification that drills were going to be happening, and the airport hasn't reported anything on the boom either. Just wanted to throw that out there because some people are speculating something happening at the airport. Not saying something didn't happen, but from all accounts and talking with people who would need to know, they don't have a clue about it, said Kenny. So I said, I listen to KDKA most evenings. I'll be tuning in tonight. And sure enough, I tuned into KDKA later that evening. One of my hosts that I like to listen to was on. His name's Chris. I won't say anything more than that. He had a caller call in and said, talking about this boom. And that one caller in particular tried to draw a string from there to the Kecksburg incidents.
Nice.
Do you want to give people the quick rundown on Kecksburg?
A caller after our own heart. Um, well, before we even get into that, I feel like I think it's interesting. One, like, thank you again, Kenny, for reaching out to us. I like that a lot of other people went to the whole Sonic Boom idea relatively quickly, because that was what we all kind of thought, like, makes that's a very simple answer. Like, and we do have the Air Force refueling wing out there, which I'm sure none of those planes are necessarily going hypersonic, but they could, I mean, there could be jets, there could be other aircraft that, you know, are going hypersonic, creating sonic booms. Those aren't things we hear very often out here, compared to, like, you know, I know we have listeners that are out towards like Wright-Patterson. They're probably more used to hearing those kind of things than we are. So I'm kind of glad to hear that other people were thinking the same thing as we are. That makes me feel a little less crazy sometimes. And it's really cool that Kenny was able to kind of like debunk that as a possibility early on by using, you know, some of his, you know, his connections. Now, the idea of a caller calling into KDKA and drawing a parallel between this apparent boom and the Kecksburg incident, there's a lot of good people out there in the world still. That's all I'm going to say. But we really should do a Kecksburg specific episode at some point. But
we should, especially since everything's been released. But do you want to give for people that might not be aware? Because this is kind of the Pennsylvania Roswell incident, if you want to give a rundown.
So just real quick, the 10,000 foot view is Kecksburg is a little town nestled in the Chestnut Ridge region of Pennsylvania. It's kind of southeast of Pittsburgh, I'd say about 45 minutes. I'd say.
Was that Westmoreland County, Somerset?
Yeah, I think it's technically Westmoreland still, but it might be in Somerset. I'm not 100% sure. Long story short, there was some sort of a crash or incident that happened there back in, I believe, early December 1964, 65. And what was reported were these large booms that accompanied a fireball falling from the sky and landing in Kecksburg, or right outside of it in the hills. One of the things that makes it so unique, and I think so much more interesting than like a Roswell, is that lots of people saw it, and there was immediate news coverage of the entire thing, because this fireball wasn't just, and these booms weren't just heard by people in Kecksburg. They were heard all across the United States and Canada as whatever this thing was. That's one of the more famous things in this area when it comes to well-documented, possibly UFO-related incidents.
Now, we'll get into this deeper in some later episode, but I should add that one I did confirm was December 9th, 1965, so
thank you for
checking. On you.
Yeah, I was close.
And it is Westmoreland County. Good job on both accounts. In the past 10 years, they've released the documents surrounding Kecksburg, so we'll get into all that at a later time. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting that someone drew that line, and they were very excited on the radio, clearly.
Oh, I'm sure somebody was like, finally, it's happening again, you know?
So I do want to say this. When Kenny emailed, that was at just after 2 p.m. on January 1st, as I said. Now, I started looking up, and over the past couple days, there's been more. We're recording this on January 2nd, the evening of. But over the past day, there's been a lot of information that's come out. So I have gone through local media, including the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, WPXI, KDK, again, the National Weather Service of Pittsburgh, located in Moon, right by the airport, and even the New York Post. Now, the general consensus is that this was most likely a meteorite. And there's more than just the logical explanation that, you know, a meteorite can travel as fast as 44 miles a second, is one of the things I read.
Oh, I believe it. Anything associated with space the numbers get crazy quick. So, yeah.
Sure enough. And So I read that, and it makes a lot of sense. Hey, this was heard over a large area, so it was not a drilling operation, a gas operation. We have a lot of quarries in our region that are often, we can drive by some places in our neighborhoods and it'll be blasting signs set up, which I don't think is a common occurrence around most of America, but that's something that we contend with.
Yeah.
A meteorite traveling and breaking up in the atmosphere to supersonic speed makes perfect sense, especially considering these things. One, there was no reported seismic activity. Now, there are trackers I read somewhere that will alert if there's anything over like a 2.3 or 2.5 Richter activity. Didn't pick up anything.
Okay.
There was no lightning events. However, the National Weather Service has a geostationary lightning mapper. Do you ever see on the news
That
when we have
sounds
storms?
fun.
Doesn't it though?
It sounds
But
fun.
you've seen its results on the news where they show the lightning bolts and where they're getting contact and everything.
Yeah.
That comes from the Weather Service's geostationary lightning mapper. At 11:20 on the morning of the 1st, there was flashes of light that appeared over Washington County towards the border with West Virginia. Washington County is immediately southwest of Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh itself. Yeah, so there were some flashes that they picked up that weren't associated with any lightning right there over by the border with West Virginia, over by the Follinsby Wheeling area. Yeah, but again, no weather that we can associate with that. So that gives more credence yet to that this is a meteorite that's coming through. So pretty wild, pretty interesting. The calls into 911 started coming in around 11:30 in the morning. So again, those flashes that were picked up by that geostationary lightning mapper coincide by that. What do you think?
So you're saying the consensus is that there was a meteorite entered the atmosphere and broke up in the atmosphere, basically. So there wasn't any impact site anywhere or anything like that.
That seems to be where all the evidence, what little there is, all the circumstantial stuff seems to point to, and it's a very logical explanation. But not confirmed as of at least the time that we're recording this.
Okay, that's interesting because I completely agree. That's probably what it was. I think it's interesting you had that many people calling in to like 911, reporting things, because that means it had to be a big enough event that enough people went, "Oh, that's not normal. Someone should know that this happened." So I think that's interesting. I think that shows like how large of an event it was. Other thing, there's two other big things that it reminds me of. One is, again, something else we could probably do a whole episode on at some point. I assume you're familiar with the Tunguska event, correct?
Yeah, up in Russia, up in Siberia.
Somewhere in Siberia.
What was that, 1911, 1915?
It was early 1900s, yeah. Early 1900s.
I'll check the date while you explain.
Yeah. But basically what it was is what they think it was, because there is debate over it, because like in this case, since there is no impact, it appears that a meteor turns into a meteorite once it enters the atmosphere, I guess, broke up over Tunguska in Siberia. There was a large explosion when this happened, because as you can imagine, lots of energy being released. And the pictures are really mind-boggling. It's just trees laid flat as far as the eye can see over these mountains. It's
my understanding that there's still some scarification on the land from that event. And I did confirm that was 1908, so a little earlier than I thought.
Yeah, so I thought it was later than that too. But the thing that's so interesting about Tunguska is it's equated to it's like a nuclear explosion of whatever magnitude. I don't know the difference between megatons or things like that in TNT, but a large enough explosion that it's like, registers from a seismic standpoint and is just incredibly destructive and literally comes out of nowhere. And whatever you think of it being the new year and everything, perennial fears of asteroids coming in and destroying the planet, the fact that we had a little guy come in on the first of the year I don't know. That's kind of cool because it's because you're saying this is all the circumstantial evidence is kind of what it points to. But I mean, that's not common. You know, it doesn't happen very often where you have a meteorite entering the atmosphere that's large enough and over land where enough people can even experience it. So I think that's really kind of a cool way to start the year.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly not so much that a lot of people were reporting their houses shaking. I mean, people
mhm.
in Squirrel Hill, down in the main area of downtown Pittsburgh, were hearing it, and some people in that area felt their bed shake. There was reports in Steubenville, Ohio, of hearing it. So meteorites entering the atmosphere are fairly common, is my understanding, but one large enough to create such a
Yes.
wide and physical presence.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I think the overall the idea of a space weather event affecting us on the first of the year. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of symbolic for how the rest of the year is going to go, one way or the
Yeah, I
other,
don't
both good
know.
or
I was
bad.
going to say, I
You
don't
know.
know how to read that as ominous or not.
Well, that's it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know either if it's ominous or not, but it sure is interesting. I think, and kind of
The
mysterious.
the number of news reports about the event that I skimmed through today, looking for good ones that quoted different people, the number of them that made some sort of reference to the low hanging fruit of like the new year comes in with a bang or a
Oh
boom was
gosh.
utterly obnoxious. How
Okay.
many cliches can we
Yeah, and
have
I
in
want
a
to be
headline?
clear. That's not what I'm saying. To be very
We're going
clear.
to take a hard stance against such statements. But again, really wanted to thank Kenny because I hadn't heard about that, and he shared that, reached out to us again with less than 3 hours after the event had occurred. So really do appreciate that. Really do appreciate you listening as well. And yeah, any other anything else like that, definitely like to hear from you all if you've got those stories. And there's another really great email came through. I want to read it to you. It's one of those that's unsettling. But before we get into it, if I asked you, Brendan, in our area of the world, what would you say? You know, we live in the land of bridges. Only Venice, Italy has more than ours. If I drive to Brendan's house, for example, which is only 12 miles away, I cross over, I think I counted 8 different bridges. So think about that for a moment. But if I
Yeah,
asked you,
I'm thinking. I was gonna say probably between 8 and 10. Yeah,
yeah,
between my house and your house. Yeah,
12 miles,
yeah,
about give or take 2 miles.
yeah.
So, but if I asked you, because those bridges are crossing water predominantly, what is the most dangerous water in our area? Talking
My
fatalities,
gut
what
re-
would you say?
I would probably say the Monongahela. That's
Really?
my gut reaction is the Monongahela because and the only reason I say that is because I know lots of folks unfortunately drown in like Slippery Rock Creek. You hear about people down in the Yakagani whenever people are like tubing and stuff like that or whitewater rafting. Unfortunately, folks do die down there. But I feel like when they talk about especially the locks and dams on the Mon, I feel like that's the most consistent when you hear about accidental
Okay.
deaths and things like that on the water.
Well, what would your runner up be? Let me put it that way. And for those of you not in this region, the Monongahela is one of the rivers that is the confluence that makes the point in Pittsburgh, the Allegheny, the Monongahela, and the Ohio there. You mentioned it earlier
Slippery
when
Rock
you were
Creek?
talking. Yeah,
Really?
Slippery Rock Creek.
Is it Slippery Rock Creek? Not
I thought you
Sandcastle.
were.
I would
I'm
have
not.
thought number two would be Sandcastle.
No,
I
no, no,
mean,
no. I don't know if it is. I'm just saying, what would you say? Because I know
yeah.
you and I fly fish a good bit, and
Hmm.
the one water that you and I both have traditionally
Hmm.
been very leery of wading into to any degree has been the Slippery Rock, specifically in the area of McConnell's Mill,
Hmm.
where we have said on this program at least once before, if not twice, now a third time, that it seems like a person drowns in that immediate area at least once a year.
At least, yeah. If not more, unfortunately.
So it is. It's a treasure. I mean, there's a lot of swift moving water. It looks a lot calmer than it is. There's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of hiking trails, and a lot of people like to climb out onto the rocks that are jutting out of the water, understandably, and they fall in. And it just there's a lot of holes in the water as well. It's one of the reasons I don't care to wade into it much.
Yeah, like the places, just to be clear, the places that me, Nick, and some of our friends wade, it is in shin deep water where you can see you can see the bottom of the creek around you for quite some area. Because yeah, especially up near the bridge, the creek might only be 15, 20 feet wide, but it might be 15, 20 feet deep with, crags and boulders and, down trees and everything. It's a very, very dangerous piece of water. And there's a lot of folks who, kayak on it and stuff like that. And, more power to them, but it's dangerous.
Yeah, sure enough. And it's often at the forefront of my mind anytime I'm in that area. I'm always very cautious, very aware about it. Now, in other areas, the Slippery Rock is a very quiet, unremarkable stream, but that area, it's just, again, the dangers are documented, the number of drownings is accounted for, and everything about it in that area of McConnell's Mill is somewhat remarkable to me, not only topographically, but it has this bottle green color that's just alluring, the water itself.
Oh, absolutely.
So here's the second email. I thought this was a really unsettling story. And, well, let me just get into it. This comes to us from Chris, who reached out back at the end of December, and he said, I'll read verbatim. Hi, I listened to your podcast about McConnell's Mill a couple days ago. I thought you would think this is interesting. I'm a home health nurse, and I travel to the homes of a lot of local, mostly elderly patients. One of my patients, who is 93 years old, told me this story. When he was about 24, he fell into McConnell's Mill in the creek there and was pulled under the water. He said that he could feel hands grabbing his ankles beneath the water, pulling him down. Somehow he managed to come to the surface and escape from being drowned. He said that for years and years, whenever he would close his eyes, he would feel those hands around his ankles. He told me that it was 70 years ago, but it still scares him, and he never went back to that area. Initial reactions, Brendan.
Oh man, initial reactions. I literally have chills over here. That's again, like I said, there's down trees and stuff like that and everything. And that's probably what he felt was just driftwood, but driftwood doesn't squeeze like a hand squeezes, if it's grabbing you versus being caught up in it kind of thing. So I think that's too simple of an answer. That is just such a unsettling and creepy. The nerd in me immediately thinks of the Dead Marshes in Lord of the Rings, where you have all the drowned men and elves pulling Frodo further and further under the water. But the idea that he would think that there were hands grabbing him and pulling him further and further underneath, that is just so unbelievably creepy. And it makes me wonder if there are any stories about water. One of the things I think of is there was a show on Discovery Channel, or it might have been on History, I can't remember which. It was one of the Monster Quest shows, which if you've never seen Monster Quest, go watch it. You'll be fascinated and put to sleep at the same time. It's beautiful.
That's quite the sell.
Oh, it is. I mean that the best way. It is beautiful filmmaking, and the guy's voice will just put you right out. One of the episodes talked about these basically these water spirits, and I believe the Amazon in South America, where basically there were sirens pulling fishermen to their deaths under the water.
Well, sirens too. I was going to say I'm thinking of Homer's writings and everything as well. Or not his writings per se. Weren't those oral and then?
Yes.
Well, that's all beside the point.
But but yeah, there's the idea of there being something in the water that doesn't want to let you go. Like, is that from a folkloric standpoint? Is that a metaphor for uh, for debris or for riptides or undercurrents or things like that? Like maybe it could be a cautionary tale in that sense. When you feel like you have something holding onto your leg or arm or whatever and pulling you further underneath, it probably doesn't feel like a cautionary tale at that point to this gentleman. And that's such like a specific thing to think about, because you'd think I imagine if you're having a trauma, this would be interesting to ask someone like Chris, which one, thank you, Chris, for doing that work. That sounds like a heck of a job you're doing. But whenever someone is having a traumatic experience, like almost drowning, you would think your senses would be heightened to the point where you would be more observant rather than mistaking something for something else. So that's why I think it's kind of quick to dismiss this as just like, oh, it's debris in the water and he was stuck in it, which obviously could be the case, but I just think it's such a creepy story that is really interesting. And I wonder if there's any native folklore around things in that body of water or other bodies of water grabbing people and pulling them in further under.
Now, I'm sure there's lore that goes back to the Aboriginal tribes, the First Nations people that were here. Just because, our first story, we talk about space and our fears of space, both real and imagined. And for the longest time, and even really still to this day, we have two spaces between us, and that is the space of the universe, the outside, the beyond the terrestrial, and then we have the oceans and the waters, and they've always been such a mystery to humanity that we have so many of our myths are coming from the depths. And so I would not be surprised. In my back and forth emails with Chris, I said, I wonder if this is clearly a very traumatic event in this man's life. So much so that, sure, as Chris wrote, he never went back to the area. Now, it's not like it's a hard place to avoid, but that is interesting to me because it's such a focal point in the region. Most everybody I know has gone there at least once, right?
Oh, if not more. Yeah, absolutely.
So I did put out there that a part of me wonders if this feeling isn't a common experience with people who are drowning, that they feel like they're being pulled back. You talked about the heightened senses, and part of it makes me wonder, you hear about time feeling like it's slowing down in the moment like that as the adrenaline kicks in, and that is, that's a good thing. It also makes me wonder if our minds don't try to personify things as a way of, this current that's pulling me, to think of it as an adversarial thing in order to kind of try to overcome that. But I put that out there, like I wonder if this isn't a common feeling by people who are being pulled underwater by current or by branches or what have you. And Chris did say, yeah, there are a lot of drownings there. It was just the way that he told the story to me. He said that he felt the hands let go of him, like there was something underwater. And apparently it really creeped Chris out too. And like you said, you were feeling goosebumps. It's quite the story. And to put yourself in that man's position. And I don't know, one of my earliest fears was water. It was a very long time before I'd go into water that was up to my shoulders. When I was the story is, and I don't have any memory of it, thankfully. The story is most people in my family were taught to swim by being thrown into a body of water. So my understanding is that in my case, when I was 3 or 4, I was thrown into the Yazoo River in Mississippi and developed a pretty healthy fear of water from then on. I don't know if I ever told you that. It is somewhat ironic because, there's a lot of Navy people and shipbuilders in the family.
And,
yeah. All that jive. So, yeah, me and water never got on that great. And, so when I was reading the story, I couldn't help but think about a couple of the times where, when we've been out fishing and I've fallen, if you stumble, like one of the people who don't might not understand, but there's waders, there's chest waders that look like overalls that are waterproof. And even with chest waders, you wear a tight belt that you keep cinched. And if you didn't know, that belt is a safety feature, because if you fall and that water gets into your pants, it weighs you down. And a lot of people drown that way. So, I mean, again, reading that story, it was definitely in my mind those scary experiences I've had on the water as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that one of the things you mentioned, kind of as per usual, gets my mind going somewhere else. You mentioned how maybe in this heightened adrenaline moment that the tide or debris, whatever it was, the brain maybe personifies it into a threat so that you could more easily so you could deal with the situation in a way your brain is familiar with. Maybe somehow that adds some sort of, there's some evolutionary or some survival thing that is aided.
There's a benefit. It's an aid.
There's some sort of benefit. And what that reminds me of is that's basically the opposite of, are you familiar with what's called the third man factor? Are you familiar with this phenomenon?
This sounds like something I've heard about, and it's probably I heard it from you, and I don't remember anything of note. So play it on me.
You've probably heard it and whatnot. So what the third man factor is it's basically, and this is without me doing any research on it, so if I screw this up, please forgive me, audience. If I remember correctly, what it is it's the idea that in situations of impending peril, doom, things like that, you hear this happening with people who are stranded in the elements, typically hikers, mountaineers, people like that. There seems to end up being a third person, or I'm not sure why it's called third person. I guess it's because it's out of your body. Another person shows up to aid you in these times, where they give you directions. They tell you to keep going. They tell you, when to stop, when to be careful, when to keep moving, when to drink water, when not to drink water. And they provide you with information a lot of times that you shouldn't normally have under those circumstances. And then whenever the person gets through the situation, it turns out that they were alone the whole time. Now, this has been documented, I guess, on quite a few occasions by relatively well-known either adventurers or psychologists. What I believe the psychologists think is happening is there's something in, the reptile part of our brain, the parasympathetic nervous system, that basically creates this other persona that can somehow get information to you and that can motivate you and help you deal with a very stressful, perilous situation. And that sounds like the opposite of basically what you were saying, Nick, where your brain goes, oh, we need to personify this threat into a person, as compared to we need to take this situation and I need to help myself out, so I'm going to create a person.
Yeah, I don't think that's the opposite at all. I think it's the same sort of thing, but approaching it from a different angle. You're creating, you're personifying something. I wasn't super familiar with that, but it makes me think. I remember in the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, and the whole height of the satanic panic, there was a reactionary thing. We had all these angel programs, and I remember. Yeah. This sounds a lot like those angel stories where it'd be like, and I had this angel, and then I got up from the ground, and my angel was gone, and things like that. It also makes me think of our inner dialogue, that has been a feature of humanity for a long time. And also, when we are by ourselves, and how we do this to a lesser extent, I think of the movie Castaway, where in order to have some relationship, there's the volleyball, Wilson, and I think we all do that. I think that was a survival mechanism. I know it's a movie, but it's like a
Correct,
real
but
survival mechanism, and
Mhm.
to what degree it plays, and to if it being viewed as a malicious or a friendly thing, to the degree that we know that we are having our inner dialogue with using this thing as a prop, or whether we really feel it's another person. I think these are all, again, this is the spectrum of a same sort of condition.
Whenever I specifically talk about the co-creative element of paranormal, this is precisely what I'm talking about. Let's say this is a real phenomenon and the person in peril interprets it as like a guardian angel, like you said, Nick. That's how they experience the situation. That might not be that different from a normal ghost encounter, as far as the mechanism of how this stuff is happening. There might be more to it than just how we are interpreting the situation. There might be perfectly reasonable mechanisms as far as how our brains interact with reality that we are still only barely scratching the surface of.
Yeah, and I think there too, it's our culture is going to dictate how we further perceive, how we put a skin on that. I know that's one of the phrases you use. So if you are of a certain religious mindset, you might view that negative third person encounter as a jinn or a demon, or as if it's there's a positive personification, it might be that angel or some sort of. If you are in a culture like we have, and you have these conditions where we talk about, oh, of course that place is haunted, any sort of perception like that, that might feel malevolent, you're going to chalk up to that.
For anyone who hears us saying this and thinks that we're trying to either naysay or be debunkers, I would say that the idea of someone manifesting an angel to help them get through a perilous situation doesn't mean that angels aren't real. It just means that we are much more powerful than we want to realize, I think.
I'll put it this way myself. I'll say, what is the more likely explanation? Like, that you are having this dialogue and you need to have that, or that there is not only is there these divine beings, but for some reason they are very concerned about you at this moment, and not concerned with you to lead you out from whatever brought you into this negative situation in the first place.
Right, exactly. And
where were they then?
Whenever we're dealing with the extremes of the human condition, these kind of vestigial traits make themselves known, and I think we can learn a lot about our present condition from looking at instances like this.
I completely agree with you, and I do again want to really thank Kenny and Chris for having reached out to us, especially over the holidays. And Brendan, if people want to reach out to us, because we are so very appreciative, how do they do that?
Yeah, if anyone has any thoughts, or just wants to chat, has any stories, has any updates, any corrections, you can get a hold of us at the Ghost Furnace Podcast, either on Instagram or Facebook. Or if you want to do what Chris and Kenny did and just send us an email, you can do that at the Ghost Furnace Podcast at gmail.com.